Okay, we're live now. Now call to order this meeting of the Huntingburg Common Council. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Father God, thank you for those committed here to serve today and for those in the audience today for their input. We ask now the decisions that we make today are made in consideration of all the citizens of Huntingburg. For these things we ask in your son's name. Amen. Give you all, most of you probably seen the minutes. Do we have a motion to accept?
Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Got a first and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of claims.
I'll make a motion to approve the claim.
We got a first,
I'll second.
first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We're going to go out a little bit out of order right now. We have Jerry Austin from the Water Department kind of discussing some situations out at the plant that we need to address. We also have your engineer here, John.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you've all been brought up to speed on our filter media issue out there. We've got two filters from the newest plant upgrade that have started leaking on us roughly 2 years ago. The original building was built in 2003, and so some of that's old construction. About 2 months ago, you guys approved Commonwealth Engineering to come in and come up with a preliminary engineering report to fix that issue. I've got John Wetzel here tonight to talk about that and answer any questions that you guys have. And from there, we'll be looking at approval to move forward to send it out for bid. John?
Real quick, how do I change?
All right, so you can go with your pages,
Gotcha.
or you
Okay.
can use the mouse.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. First of all, my name, as Jerry says, is John Wetzel. I'm a project engineer with Commonwealth Engineers. Actually been involved with the city on projects, water projects in the past. I was with a different consulting firm at that time, but it was involved some water main replacement and also involved in their most recent plant upgrade, which mainly took place in 2019, 2020 out there at the water treatment plant. So what I'd like to do this evening, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I want to give just a brief history of the water treatment plant, talk about the problems that's been encountered with a couple of the filter cells that are leaking, and then go over the possible improvements on those and possible costs as well. To start with, it's kind of splitting. Well, shoot, I don't know how to, it's kind of splitting, there we go. Okay, there, we're back. To start with, I just wanted to talk briefly about the water treatment plant and what was done in 2003 and then also in 2019 and 2020. To start with, the plant was originally built in its current location in 2003. Intake structure was built, a raw pump station was built, and a treatment plant building was built on the west side of the dam. That treatment plant building contained what I'm going to call the treatment process. It contained the flocculators, the settling tanks, and also the filters for one treatment train. It was able to handle 800 gallons a minute. At that time, that construction was also set up that sometime in the future to add a second treatment train. So parts of the second treatment train were also constructed at that time. And this is kind of a picture of the treatment train itself. Let me go back up one. Inside the floor plan of the building, the main treatment train was flocculators, clarifiers, and then filters. The filters themselves are each, there's 4 of them. They're 12 by 12. They're roughly about 20 feet deep. Kind of the cross section of this. The actual floor plan or actual floor elevation inside the building is kind of where the green and the yellow end right there. So that would be the first floor. So most of this construction the flocculators, clarifiers, and the filters, it's under that slab or under that elevation of the building. The bottom of the filters are almost 20 feet deep total, almost 15 feet, a little over that, almost 18 feet from the original floor elevation. So those are fairly deep. For the second treatment train, the bottom slab, and the filters in particular, what's called out in green, that was built in 2003. At that time, it was set up, the outside walls were done, and at some time in the future, you could come back in and add on to them. So that was the first train. This is where the bottom slab and those side walls were built right there. In 2020, the decision was made to upgrade the plant. The plant then was upgraded to 1,600 gallon a minute. Several things were done. Some of the things that were done were outside of the building, but pertinent to this project. What was done, we added the second treatment train with flocculators, clarifiers, and the filters. And in orange, I'll call it the very top wall, and then the interior of the filter to partition off the 4 tanks. What was in orange was built at that time. The filters themselves hold up filter media. That filter media is roughly 3 feet deep, and there's a false floor under there. That false floor is actually about a 3 inch wide, 3 inch thick concrete monolithic floor, and it has literally a couple hundred of nozzles in the bottom of that thing that allows the water as it drains through the filter to go through that under slab. And then underneath that slab, there's about a 2-foot area there. The actual drains that leave the filters are underneath that slab or underneath that false floor and in the bottom of this slab. You can't see anything from above except you can see the top of the filter media there, but they're still roughly about 5 feet under that media before you get down to that concrete slab. Water typically comes in and will be controlled by the level in the clear well, and as the pumps and water flows, pumps the water out and flows through here, water will flow down those filters through that media, through the false floor, into the 2 effluent drains. There's a 16-inch pipe under the slab for each one of these cells that run over into the clear well. A couple years ago, the guys at the plant noticed that when they come in the morning, a couple of the cells were dry. In other words, they could see the filter media, no water above them. The other 6 filters, those filters 5 and 7 are the ones that are leaking. The other filters stayed full. Got a little bit concerned, obviously, because that water had to be going somewhere. So plant personnel did a couple things to try to investigate what was going on. The first thing was they could access the drain pipes, and they actually took cameras and pushed cameras up the drain pipes. One of the thought was that 16-inch drain pipe that's underneath that slab, that could be leaking. Maybe there's a crack in there. Maybe we could see something through, in that pipe, and maybe that's where the leak was. They found some media that had settled out in that pipe, dug out that media, got it out of there, but the pipe itself looked good. Once they put the camera in, no concern with the pipe. Can't really see a lot. I don't know if you want to expound on that. Can't really see a lot when you get up in that pipe as it comes into the bottom of that, because you have about a 2-foot space in there before that other false floor is in there, but nothing looked bad. From above, looking at the media, there was no apparent sinkhole. Sometimes if you have a leak or something, you may be able to see that's pulling material down or that water's leaving fairly quickly. There was nothing up above you could see either. That level of the media stayed pretty flat. You just couldn't tell anything. So started trying to decide then, well, what do we do next? Let's measure what kind of leakage that we have. So they started taking measurements back in 2023 to try to come up with the leakage out of each of these filters. So they measured the water level, and that water level is basically from the bottom or from the water level down 8 feet is where the media is. So when you get down to 8 feet, that's roughly the level of the media. Tank 5 or filter 5 was leaking anywhere in the range of 10 to 15 gallon a minute. Filter 7 was leaking anywhere from 3 to 6 gallon a minute. Last year did those same readings again, and it's still leaking the same amount roughly as what it was back in 2023. So the past year that really hadn't changed. But over time, that is a lot of water that leaves each of those tanks. If you continue that, there's concern about where that water's going. When you look outside, there was no area apparent outside by the building where water was coming up. Wasn't sure where the water was going. There are a lot of pipes around that building, and that could be following some of the pipes, but nothing surfaced. Couldn't tell where that water was coming up at. But that is a concern. If that water's leaking out of the tank, it's got to be going somewhere. The belief is if that pipe is not, if the pipe itself is not leaking, the drain effluent line leaving that is not leaking, likely the walls, some of the walls of the tank are what is leaking. To get down to it is a chore past what the investigation that they have done. The belief is since that water level is going to the filter top, it's continuing down there. That leak has to be underneath that filter media in the lower part of the tank. Some likely culprits may be where the lines, the effluent lines come up to the bottom of the tank. That effluent line was put in 2003, so that was already there. Could be leaking around that pipe. The interface between the wall and the slab, that's another place that could be leaking. One of the things that the treatment plant personnel had seen over the years was previous leaking in filters 2 and 4, the walls there. That is a clear well about 20 feet deep or an open pit right here, and water would leak through those walls. So over, I don't know how many times, but several times over the 15, 20 years when that was originally built, they pumped grout into that wall to stop that leaking. So the leak we're seeing is not the first one we've seen on the filters, but it's the first one where we're just not being able to access that. Filters 2 and 4, very good that it was open into that pit and they could access it through that pit. Filters 5 and 7 are a different animal. There's no way to access down deep. They're buttoned right up against the clarifiers, buttoned right up against the other filters, and then the outside wall or the other filter itself. So there's no way to get down to it to do further excavation without really getting into some work. And to do that, you have to remove the media. You hit that false floor. Our belief is that the outer walls are a big culprit. That false floor would have to be removed, and there's really no other way to do it besides manual labor. And that's probably taking a jackhammer in there, getting that false floor out, getting down to the bare concrete outer walls, outer slab of that tank. So some of the options that we're going to discuss right now, no matter which option we talk about, that work we feel is still have to be done. You got to take the media out, take the troughs out, take out that false floor. Whatever remedy is done, after it's done, it'll have to be tested to make sure it's watertight, and then that false floor will have to be put back in there. That includes all the nozzles in each of those false floors, and then the media will have to be put back. And talking to Tonka, the filter manufacturer, we do not feel that we can pull out that media, keep it separated enough, and put it back in the way it needs to be to reuse. So once we remove that media, that means we cannot reuse it again and have to be new media put back in after the fact. A couple of the things that we talked about with Tonka to start with was, hey, is there any way maybe instead of removing that false floor and then putting it back, that's a lot of work, could we come in and maybe put a slab right above that and in these 2 filters? The problem being when you do that, all 8 filters work together. Their levels are controlled by the level in the clear well, and all of them move kind of together, or the water level should stay together on them. That will cause a little bit of hydraulic imbalance both on the filling and in the backwashing. If you put a false floor or put a new floor or bottom in those 2 filters, that raises everything up. That does affect how flow will split into them, and that does affect how the backwash will work with those filters. So we did check that with Tonka. They do not recommend that. Their recommendation is whatever's done, keep those filters hydraulically the same as the other 6. I think we're going to cause problems if we do anything else. So that kind of limits, we feel, to removing all this and then getting down to the walls themselves, and then doing some sort of lining or coating on those walls. We looked at 3 different products. One is a polyurea product. It's a spray-on type product, actually used a lot in the wastewater side of things, in manholes, in tanks, pits that are used in wastewater. That polyurea, though, they have an NSF version that can be used on potable water. I've seen many manholes coated with this stuff. Feel like that is a good possible remedy to coat the tank itself. The other thing we looked at was 100% solids epoxy. There are some products out there that are high build material, specially made for this, that could be applied to about a ½ inch thick. 100% solids epoxy is another alternative for the coating we feel it could be done. And the last thing would be a cementous crystalline material, which is a Zypex. That's also an admixture into concrete. Obviously, this is already poured concrete. It would have to be used as a mixture or a coating on top of the existing concrete. We feel like whatever's done, there are 3 alternatives there for coating or lining of the material or of the tanks. However, the cost of these is fairly expensive. Again, some of this work, regardless of what product is going to be used, in fact, most of this work is going to be the same for each of those products. You'd have to remove the troughs and media, you'd have to remove that underdrain system, and that is a real chore to get out of there. You would then have to repair any concrete issues if the pipe's coming in, if there's anything leaking around those would have to be grouted up. Anything you see from honeycombing or anything on the walls of the tank, fix that. And then whether it's coated with a polyurea, epoxy, whatever, it had to be coated. After it's coated, the testing would have to be done to make sure it's watertight. And then again, regardless of which one's used, you'd have to rebuild that monolithic underdrain. And that's a chore. That's putting all those nozzles back in, pouring that into place, and then putting the median troughs back in and returning them to service. And that's a lot of manual labor. Being inside a building like it is, you have to keep the other filter plant running, the rest of the filter plant running. So to get that out of there, worst case, if we can vac the media out, or worst case, it's shovels and manual labor to get all that stuff out. So between the 3 alternatives, because that work is almost all the same, the 3 alternatives are almost the exact same cost. The only difference would be between that material and the application of that material for each of the tanks. We're roughly right in the $980,000 to $1,030,000 on the construction cost. We used a blanket 20% non-construction cost as well. Didn't know up front if you wanted, inspection, some of that stuff. Feel like you'd have to get bids on it, but didn't know if you want inspection. The 20% would cover any of those possibilities. So we're looking around the $1,180,000 range to $1,238,000 range is the estimate on a potential fix. It's just in a place that is very inaccessible, and although we know the tank is leaking, cannot pinpoint and say X is the spot where it is leaking. I think there's some concern that there has been some leakage on a couple of the other tanks. That was grouted shut. This is not the first leaks that have been seen, but they are prevalent and you just can't get to them. So we felt like, if you go in and you do one spot of the tank and that's it, what's the chances of there may being a leak or something that would come back later? We felt like once all that stuff has gotten out of there, the best option would be to line it. even if you find around one of the influent pipes or that, where where you think you may be getting some leakage around it, we just feel like if you're going to the expense to totally remove all that stuff, totally put it back, it was just insurance to line that entire tank below grade, and feel comfortable that we have the issue taken care of. Kind of the lining, and it's a little bit hard to see at this distance, but that lining would be the bottom slab, and it would be all 4 of the walls up above. There's a short wall in there, and then up above where any water level would high water level in those tanks would be. So it would basically be the 4 walls, and the under slab of that tank would be lined.
Just reiterate what John said. We've been working on this, like he said, for 2 years. We have been working with Tonka, which is a filter system. John himself, pretty much the whole time. We've had a couple of local companies that do this kind of work, kind of come in and consult with us, give us some avenues to go. We have triple checked valves. We even, when we cambered our under drains that he spoke of there, to see if there was any cracks in the walls, not something we do every day. We did have wastewater employees come out that they're cameraing sewer mains daily, to come out and put eyes on it with us to see if anything stood out to them. So really, at this point, everything leads to something with the concrete foundation of the filter cell. We, as far as, like John said, our next steps is to start removing stuff. Everything that's done is pretty much manual labor. There's no way to get equipment in there. I know Pam, you and Tim were just out there not too long ago. Set up the same way the old site is. I'm sure every one of you's been out there at some point. So everything is, as John said, it's going to be carried out in buckets and shovels and handheld jackhammers, so very labor intensive. Kind of with his first option there of pouring a new floor and starting from there. We do have some regulations with IDEM, with city growth and things like that. We have to uphold a certain percentage of our water plant, the water we can produce for the city side. So I feel strongly that we do need to venture away from that avenue. And really, as he said, with our concrete in past years, I know I've came to you guys, we've talked about it, where wastewaters came in, helped us do the injections to fix leaks. The previous 4 filters, we've repaired 2 leaks on those filter walls, and then we've had about 6 leaks in our, it'd be the adjacent wall that butts up to our chemical feed zone / clear well there, that we've actually came in and injected grout in there to stop those leaks. Bad thing with the water filtration process is we use chlorine, and chlorine is very corrosive to concrete. We went at this thinking that, the concrete in 2003 was brand new, nothing's been put in it. Nobody would ever think of, anything like this. And then as far as the coating goes, we get down there, we're going to be able to pinpoint the issue currently, repair that issue, and the thought process behind coating both cells is so we don't spend roughly $1.2 million, and a year down the road, something that hadn't showed face then presents itself. It's more of an insurance policy to protect this. And you're more familiar with this coating than I am. That coating carries a fairly hefty warranty period on that, does it not?
The polyurea more so than some of the other. Been involved in a couple of tanks where we used 100% solids epoxy, older clear well type tanks. Had good success with it. One of them here in a city in southern Indiana was leaking roughly 100,000 gallons a day. They used that 100% solids epoxy product, one of those, and felt like they took care of the leaking on that. The polyurea has seen that way more on the wastewater side than the water side. However, it is used on the water side. The wastewater side, though, thousands of manholes every year are coated with that. And it's also done in lift stations, and they do a couple hundred structures a year as well on potable water side of things as well. So we could get references if you would want to see those. We did contact the manufacturers. I got pricing from manufacturers, also talked to several different contractors to get, help us get quotes and come up with the decent estimates for removal of the media, removal of the false floor, and then putting the information or putting the material back in. So felt like we have got as good a quotes as we can get. You never know market conditions, but we did contact numerous contractors and did talk with each of the material lining material suppliers.
If I'm reading this right, that coating is only about 15% of the cost.
Yeah,
85 is
it's
just getting there.
Yeah, as far as the whole cost, it's pretty minimal compared to the whole project cost, especially for the peace of mind and longevity of filters. Since this issue did come about, we did shut those 2 filters down. Those filters haven't ran, so we've been operating on the 6 filters, mainly just for the sheer fact that we are losing, like you said, anywhere from 10 to 15 gallons of water a minute. In a 24-hour day, that really adds up. So we haven't been using those filters. Hasn't caused any issues as far as us with our water production. We're still running our normal shifts. But it does cause us to run our filter plant at a higher percentage of capacity than what it would as far as having all 8 filters going.
And I didn't touch on this earlier, but there is a table in there, what the water usage was average the last couple of years for each month going through the water plant. And what we looked at was, hey, if you only have 6 of the 8 filters in service, what plant capacity are you using with what's going through the plant now? On an average, they're using roughly 70 to 75% of the plant capacity with only 6 filters, but on peak days, they're 90 to 100%. Some of the peak days have been over 100% based upon the loading rates, what that loading rate should be on the filters. So on peak days, if there's only 6 filters there, that plant is being run at capacity. If 8 filters are all in service and all of them running, and you have 1,600 gallon a minute going through there, you could have almost 2.3 million go through the plant a day. Peak days have been somewhere around the 1.8, 1.9, I think was the highest that's gone through the plant in the last couple of years.
Any water quality issues?
No water quality issues at all, other than, as John just mentioned there, running the plant at a little higher capacity rate will, over time, deteriorate that filter media a lot faster. So it's an issue there as well. And IDEM that is a requirement with this. Our filter plant is set up to run 8 filters, so we do have to have 8 filters running. Something that we've had conversations with our IDEM representative. She knows that we're working on this issue to get it repaired. So it's not an issue currently because we are still actively working on the issue, but it is required of us to have all 8 of those filters up and running properly, whether we need them or not.
What about contamination during construction? How are you gonna, if you're gonna be jackhammering in 2 filters, how are you gonna keep the other 6?
I feel very confident with that. Whenever we
Plan
did
for
the
that.
plant upgrade, we hung plastic curtains. And I mean, we were running the whole time this plant upgrade. A lot larger scale project was going on in 2019 and in 2020 and had no issues whatsoever.
Obviously, keeping the plant in service, yeah, that is an issue, but precautions could be taken to allow that to happen. Again, when it was expanded back in 2019, 2020, the first treatment train, that was running the whole time. The plant was in service the whole time that construction was going on. It's an inconvenience to both the operators and to the contractor, no doubt about it. But yeah, it could be.
Part of why the pricing's that way, I'm assuming.
Yeah. It's just, most of this is just manual labor to get that out of there and to do this work.
And you're working around each other all day. So,
Is it only number 7 leaking or 7 and 5?
5 and 7, sorry.
So both of them are leaking?
Yes,
Both,
yeah,
5 and 7.
one's significantly more than the other.
correct. The one that's on the exterior wall of the building is significantly more.
That's-
Filter 5.
It's good that you've already considered that. I figured that was the case, but I just wanna make that
Yeah.
So we put a lot of time and effort in this.
apparently clear, because, I mean, you just built the whole side up, you built that one whole side. That's the new side that we just whatever, added on, you know, that we've had problems because these were untested wells or whatever you want to, pits or whatever you want to call them.
The concrete.
The concrete was untested.
Concrete was on 2003.
The under drain, the slab, and then those side walls up to, except for the last 3 or 4 feet, were put in 2000.
Yeah.
The interior, as we talked about, the interior walls of, the interior walls to partition off and make them into 4 cells. In theory, you had a one roughly 30 by 30 slab that was there, but the interior partitions then were installed at that time, and that partitioned them off into the 4 12 by 12 filters.
And our filtration plant ran 2 years before this problem showed itself, so it wasn't something that was that happened right away. We had no issues with it 2 years from the upgrade, so it wasn't something that the project was done and we seen it right away.
Was the false floor installed during that part, or was it installed in 03?
2020. Yeah,
false
the
floor was
false
put in
floor, everything inside there, the troughs, the media, that false floor, and the 4 new ones, they were installed in 2020.
And when we come back in, we'll have to put all new media in and all new,
Correct.
everything in.
The troughs potentially could be reused, with care if they're taken out. But that media, once that's reused, talking with Tonka, don't feel the way that's gradated and stuff, that they can take it out and then put it back in and reuse that. If everybody remembers back in 2020, we did have an issue with Tonka delivering media and having to.
They had the wrong size media.
Yeah.
We had some pump issues.
Yeah, and Tonka took care of that, but we had issues with the media when that was originally installed.
Any idea how long a project is going to take from start to finish?
Had a potential schedule in there, assuming obviously it's costly and didn't know how the costs could potentially be worked out, but assuming that in April give authorization to move forward, by July advertising for bid, receiving bids in August, and then starting this in the fall and finishing first part of the 2026 potentially.
So just the construction phase, you're thinking 4 months, 5 months?
Yeah, probably roughly 4 to 5, probably 4 months.
And that would be our best time as well to do that. As John's graph showed a while ago, our peak runtime hours are spring and summer. So we're starting to come down on production there. Everybody's stops using water as much, and we're not running around out there as much, having to do as much either. So it would help greatly to keep us somewhat on track to be able to fall in line with that as well.
Are these issues, is this something that's common after 20 years? I mean, you're seeing this in other plants, or is this, could it possibly be a?
We actually talked to City of Evansville. They actually redid a lot of their filters. They had some leakage around some pipes, but nothing major. I'm not familiar with a lot of problems like this. There are some. There's another water utility around here, pretty big one. Their clear well is leaking about almost 100 gallon a minute. They kind of know where the leak is, but older tanks. I know this is not a real old tank, but concrete tanks, there are some that do encounter some leaks. But I'm not going to say that this is, oh yeah, boy, we see it everywhere. That's really not the case. No.
You don't hear about it.
As you start into this project, do you think there'd be any forensic work done to figure out, will you know once you get it opened up where the leak is at, or are we still going to be guessing all the way to the point of finishing the project?
A little bit, unless there's something when you take out the media, take out that false floor. Like I said, if something shows itself, there's 2 influent pipes that come in on the bottom of that slab. At least my thinking is there could be something around where that, that's a penetration. Around that penetration potentially, you see it in the past. Talking to Evansville, they had some issues right around that penetration of some of theirs. Also the wall floor interface, you see that sometimes, but sometimes it's not apparent. It's not like you can say, oh, yeah, right there's the problem, that's where your leak is. Some of the other systems that we've seen, they'll actually put water back in it and they'll put dye in there. And they'll try then to see, if it is leaking, where does that dye take off to? and they can maybe see, oh, okay, yeah, we're leaving over there, the dye's heading this way. I've seen that done.
Currently, we know it's below the filter media until we start this. Our hands are kind of tied as far as what avenues we're gonna take. We've looked at all the valve possibilities, cracked pipes, everything. So we're to the point now to where this is where we're at. Until we start, we won't know. And then from there, I'm not trying to continue to speak about the same thing, but once we get to that point, with concrete does two things, right? Gets hard and cracks. Once we get there and we remove that media, I feel that it's best to continue to finish the project out in its entirety and coat those cells so we're not doing this again in a couple of years. It's unfortunate this has happened. We hope we don't see any of this in any of the other filters. The older side, as I said, luckily the filter leaks on the older side was in filter 4, and the wall on the filter is in our pipe galley, so we could physically see the water coming through the wall there. That's why we were able to fill that filter with grout and seal that issue. But we've got 6 more filters here that are made of concrete, and I feel our best avenue with this would be to complete the project and coat the cells.
The difference between the poly and the epoxy, like you had mentioned that there's, one of them is more guaranteed than the other, or like more, like a warranty, or no?
On the wastewater side, that polyurea, one manufacturer does give like a 10-year warranty period on that.
I think the only difference is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the polyurea was made for the wastewater side, that's now came potable water side, is more of a membrane flexible coating.
Flexible.
Where it has some flexibility, where the other coating is a rigid, hard coating.
In a way, it's a paint product, but it's a high build, 100% solid epoxy, so it will build up. But it's applied, sticks right to the concrete.
If it's something would move, it would still protect it. I guess the big burning question is, how do we fund this? How do we pay for this?
That's fine. Again, I have 2 questions.
Yeah, what's your plan there, Jerry?
Right?
I asked that question.
Me and
Jerry
Tom's
walked out
talked
of my
about.
office
Yep.
asking that question.
Yep. Me and Neil and me and Tom's both talked about that. There's 2 different options there, of course. We do have our in-house option with the energy department, with the generous low-interest loans that John gives out.
Look at him.
Or there's the other option of seeking, like an SRF fund or something like that. The only bad thing with that option, when we seek outside funds, it costs us thousands of dollars to do the paperwork. We could have $25,000, $30,000 wrapped up in fees just going through the application process to get those funds.
I mean, would those be grants, or would they just be loans?
No, it'd be low interest rate loans.
Okay.
What is the permitting process is, I can't read that from here, but the permitting process, I assume there's a permit or an IDAM or something?
Don't feel like you need a construction permit for this, because it's not new construction. We're not changing the design parameters of the plant. So don't feel like there would have to be a construction permit that would need to be for this.
You're right.
And kind of like if you change out valves, that kind of thing, do maintenance, you don't need a permit for that. But this is not changing the design parameters of the plant and not new
Okay,
construction, so we
so-
don't feel like it would be needed.
Well, I just go through a lot of permitting processes and final inspections and some of the stuff I do, and sometimes that takes a year. So that's why I'm worried about that part of it.
Normally, if there is an IDEM construction permit involved, typically, when you apply for that, it takes roughly 60 to 90 days to actually get the permit through, like their water people up there. So you do have to apply for that, once it's applied for, roughly 60 to 90 day period before you actually receive the permit. But again, we wouldn't anticipate that because we're not changing that design parameter of the plant.
And there's a cost to that, you think? Is there a cost to that permit?
Usually not, no.
For municipalities on the water side, it's not.
Okay.
I mean, this is a repair, so hopefully
Yeah, like you said, anytime we do repairs there, we just had one of our high service pumps, we pulled it out, we had to completely rebuild it. We had to, part of the foot on that, we had to cut out, weld new sections in. We've never had any issues with IDIM permitting as long as everything stays the way it is. If it's just construction to repair an issue. So,
If we'd be changing chemicals, changing
Yes.
chemical location, something like that, yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
Definitely be required, but again,
Well,
just
it
didn't
kinda-
talk for changing the
I guess what
parameters.
hit me was the coating. Does the coating have to be approved, or is it already approved and for use in that?
Yeah, anything that would be put in here, we'd want to make sure it meets the NSF certification, NSF 61 certification. There's a polyurea product out there, and there's also 100% solids epoxy product that does meet that. Anything that we put in here, definitely have to make sure it meets those standards.
So where are we moving forward? What do we need to do here?
I'm just asking for that $1.2 million question.
Is that all you need?
It looks like under your proposed schedule, the next step would be to evaluate
Right.
financing alternatives.
Yeah.
The problem with financing it in-house is that you could borrow for a term of 5 years, and it's
Right.
gonna be repaid within 5 years. And
Right.
that would be a pretty hard stretch for the water utility. SRF loan, Buzz, I don't know, do they require parity bonds, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not a problem, but just the time it takes to get on their, well, unless you did their pool program.
Could do the pool.
The pool program's a little less, it's probably in the low 4% range. You know, for this small, I mean, $1 million isn't small, but for this small project, you know, it'd probably be quicker and more expedient to maybe just go to the local bank and do something there, or.
The SRF has a pretty big need, and they put out what they call their PPL, or Project Priority List. And they normally put that out basically, I think, in June.
July 1st.
June, July time period, but they'll have what's called a fundable range. And when you start looking at the scope of the projects that they have, that fundable range is very small typically. The fundable range means you get the best rates.
Best interest rate, yeah.
And the rest, all those other projects that fall below that fundable range are eligible for what they call pooled funds. And depending upon the need, they may have a fall closing, a winter closing, a spring closing on that, and you would get the pool with other projects to get that financing, but again, roughly low 4%.
Yes, that's where it has been here in the last three months or so.
What are the terms?
I was gonna say what.
And it's a 20, well, you
Is it
can actually
20?
go longer, but.
The one issue with being in a plant like this, typically you look at a lot of lifespan or periods in a plant of being 20 years. They may want to hold that to a 20-year period. They do allow up to, I think, 35 years on some things, but they may want to hold you to a 20-year.
What's the risk that we fix this and then 6 months or a year afterwards, we find some other parts of the tank leaking that we haven't addressed yet?
As far as these two tanks,
Not those two, but some of the other tanks.
some of the others,
The other six.
it is a possibility.
Yeah,
Like I said, we've already, the side, the first terrain that we'd had, we've already had 2 leaks there. We were thankful and lucky enough that we were able to repair those without having to jump into this kind of work to repair those. It's, with the plant, like he said, 2003 is not really that far, long ago, but 2003 with concrete that's fully submerged with water and chlorine and chemicals in it, it does take a toll on it. So it's like he said, they usually put a 20-year life expectancy on this, and then you're usually updating the water plant from there. So
Would there be any staging cost savings to just go ahead and do the other ones now while we're in there?
we would not be able to do that, just due to our water demand.
Could cut them all.
We would have to do them, I mean, if that would be something that we would look into, they would have to be done in stages.
The other financing option might be to consider a 5-year bond anticipation note, because if you have another project coming right up on the heels, you could do that for 5 years and just pay interest on it. And then when you're gonna have to do this in another one of the filters
Well,
also.
No,
No,
Buzz,
no,
we
no.
don't even
Don't
bring
talk
that
like
up,
that,
don't
Buzz.
even put that out there. Not gonna.
Need another project.
No, this is it. This, as far as the water filtration
Well,
process, this is the only issues that we have there.
But
The only issues we're
if you're in
looking
a
at.
hurry to get it fixed, that's another option is to,
Well, if nothing else, we're gonna do it in-house and if we have
As
to
far
do
as the
it
in-house,
after
the in-house financing, is there any way to anticipate, I guess, a lower payment with a potential balloon payment at the end? They could potentially roll that over into another loan from the energy department, if you would.
Is there no, we're thinking the same thing, go ahead.
Go ahead and do it, and in-house finance it, and then if we get to the point it's done, then we could go on the outside, get the finance and pay it off.
so we probably need a intent to reimburse resolution. So that you would reimburse whatever funds you put up front with
Right.
a tax exempt bond down the road.
Is there, kind of like you guys are thinking, but is there a way to do it to where we pay our installments for the 5 years, and then when we get to the 5-year
Yeah.
end, we can take out another note with the energy department versus reaching outside the city and pretty much taking out another 5-year note to
As long as
continue to
it's,
pay.
as long as it's paid before, within 5 years, and it could be payment by renewal,
Payment by renewal.
I think. Now, State Board of Accounts may not agree with us, but,
Right. Do you have any
I
input
mean,
on that by
it's a lot
chance?
cheaper than.
We
no,
think
I-
that-
It's been done before.
It's been done before? Okay.
It's
In
creative.
fact, no community that's done it.
It's very simple. We're gonna loan you the money and you're gonna have to figure out how to cut $1 million out.
Right.
To pay him back in
That's
the next
right.
5 years.
Yeah.
You're about $17,000 to $18,000.
Yeah, that was, if that's possible, we could set our payment, whether it's quarterly or, biannually, set our payment that we're paying back with the intent in 5 years, whatever's left, we could then refinance in a way,
Sounds like one of the raises.
to continue to carry that out,
Yeah, we
so.
don't want to.
So
That's why I wanna
can
carry it
we
on.
go ahead and get permission to start this project and then decide later, get some,
We would love
get
that.
some notes on experience of the coatings, that we can
Yeah.
get some, so we know which coating we're gonna apply.
And one thing you could do, we kind of recommended, if you could get pricing for the different alternatives or the different coatings and find out exactly what the difference are in costs. And you can make a decision once you got that pricing as well.
Should we
I
do
mean, because most of the cost of this is, regardless which coating you use, getting that media out of there, getting the under drain out, putting it back in.
Right.
The coating's kind of a smaller cost overall, but you could take bids or alternatives for each of the coatings and see at that time too.
Okay.
With
That's what I
that, correct me if I'm
suggested.
wrong, but the coating would be, is normally sprayed on by a different company than the company that would be doing the construction?
Potentially, like that
Potentially.
polyurea.
Right, subcontract.
That product may want to have a certified applicator put that in. So you may have a general contractor that would bid and say, yeah, I'm going to bid to do all this work, but they may have a sub then who would be a certified applicator who would come and apply that product.
I would assume they'd have to have a certain texture on the wall, a certain grid or
It
something.
has to be
Some-
prepared
It'd have to be
right.
shot peened or
Yeah.
whatever, so it would, otherwise they wouldn't warrant it.
Yeah.
Do we think we can do this? I mean, we know where we can find the money to make the project work, but how, over time, is it gonna be paid? Do we need to, are we gonna be able to do it in our current budget, or is it gonna require looking at the rates again in the water
I'm
department?
looking at that right now, actually, I don't have the 24 update with me, and I'm not signed on the internet, so I have it on the server, I think, back at the office, but looking at 23's data, it looked like there's ample coverage in there to maybe come up with a couple $100,000 a year to pay it off in 5 years. But it depends on what other capital projects
Breaks.
come up.
Whatever.
Whatever it breaks.
Nothing's gonna break, guys.
Alright, so, to move forward, let's go ahead and get permission to start this project, and we'll figure a later date to do the coding. Is that fair enough?
We can track down some more information on the coatings to to be able to bring back and talk about those. I can bring those with me to the next council meeting if we get them and speak on them and kind of give you guys a little more information on those coatings, and we'll just proceed with the timeline here. And
I'll defer to Phil, but
We need to promote
we need to
a
have
motion
first
to,
a motion.
a motion to,
Well, I guess.
Investigate or-
Yeah, a motion to continue with investigation of the project, investigating financing. And then you're not gonna take any further action until when? At what point will we require further engineering? Until they approve the project and go forward with bidding?
According to that schedule, I mean, at that point, you know, if you decide to move forward, you could approve preparation of the plans and specifications or what's required. It would have to be, obviously, what media is gonna have to go back in there, any preparation of the concrete, any rehab of the concrete part of the product being applied as well. So that would all have to be put together and a quote package or bid package put together for contractors.
so we'd have, what, 3, 4, and 5 would be John with Commonwealth taking care of that. And then from there, we'd bring it back to present to put out the bid.
So do you think these prices will be incorrect, or like, would it be higher, or possibly lower, or something by the time you get the?
We're hoping lower.
I mean, what
Estimates.
numbers are these? Are these?
Estimates.
Estimates,
Engineering
our
estimates.
estimates.
Engineering
And
estimates.
you did put, you say 20% kind of in there to,
For non-construction costs, we used a 20%
I see
over
that.
and above the construction. But we did get quotes, but again, nobody can control the economy and what happens if prices go up and or down. But feel like we had justification for why we put our estimates together, but that doesn't mean we're, can't be low or high.
So Phil's next move, just to make a motion to proceed.
Yeah, so the way the schedule is set up is we use the next month to investigate financing alternatives. And then in April, sometime in April, you'd authorize the Commonwealth, if you so choose, to proceed with preparing a complete design work.
I think for that interdepartmental loan, you just need, you've done those.
Yeah.
Or
We do an ordinance.
ordinances routinely, but I would also do the
Reimbursement,
reimbursement resolution.
Okay.
Just
just in
if it
case
doesn't
we.
get paid off in 5 years, you can flip it to a tax exempt bond.
I know the rest of that.
I've got to check. I'm not sure if you could wait 5 years to do a reimbursement, but I think if you go through all that,
Any of that.
I think it's pretty flexible. But if you don't do that, then
You can't reimburse yourself. So really, I'm not even sure any action, official action is necessary tonight, other than instruct Tom and the administration to proceed with evaluating financing alternatives and bring it back to you the next meeting. And at that point, or one of the meetings in April, and at that point, you would consider authorizing preliminary design work.
Okay. Got that, Tom?
I'll second that.
Are you gonna make a motion, or?
I think
I don't think we need a motion.
you don't need one.
I don't think you necessarily need one.
I'm just, okay.
I got that.
Okay.
Necessity's gotta be great.
Sorry.
that's a lot.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you guys.
You done, Jerry?
So come back next month.
You're going last next time.
I'm always the quick one.
I made somebody wait for me last time.
All right, so next up, we have the public hearing on the proposed gas rates, 4.1. Should have a copy of that.
This was the time and place advertised for a public hearing on proposed ordinance number 2025-04, an ordinance establishing new scheduled rates and charges for the municipally owned gas utilities.
So we need to open the public hearing, Mayor.
Yes, I'm sorry, we'll now open up the public hearing for gas rate ordinance number 2025-04.
Typically, the way we you've done this in the past, or the council's done this in the past, we've had Mr. Crowe just, again, give a brief synopsis of what he presented last time, and then answer any questions from the
good.
public, and from the council.
Yeah, and I'll try to go through this briefly here, but the current gas rates, there was a minor modification in 2022 when they did away with the utility receipts tax. Everybody had to do a rate reduction of 1.2% basically. But other than that, our base rates were set up in December of 2013. So it's been, 12 plus, about 12 years we've been living on the same rates. And prior to that, back in 2008 through 2012, our base cost of gas was not quite twice as much as it is now, but it was $7 per MCF. Our revenues back in 2008 were over $5.1 million. The proposed revenues we're seeking, the revenues in 2024 were about 3.9 million. So revenues decreased about 1.2 million, and primarily due to the cost of gas being less. But what that does is it shrinks your revenue base, makes those percentages seem more sensational, which, you've been wrestling with, I know, since the last time I was here. But even with the proposed rates, we're still looking at less revenue than what we had back in 2008, just to put that in perspective. But last year, we try to use May as a cutoff for the gas utility because that's sort of you don't have weather being an extreme variable when you use a May cutoff. But we were upside down about $335,000, and over the past 3 years, we've had a decrease in cash of over $800,000. I assume that probably hasn't gotten any better this year, Tom. With
No.
Yeah.
We haven't had to borrow though.
Pardon me?
We have not had to borrow that.
So, any rate, and under the Indiana code for municipal utility rates, there's a caveat that says that the rates shall be sufficient to provide for these mandatory revenue requirements. And the only revenue requirement that we have included that's an optional one, is the payment in lieu of taxes, which it's really not an option. The city general fund depends on having those payments from gas and electric, and I think water's still making it. I don't think we do in sewer, but sewer's a public works. It's different than the public utility. It comes under a different statute. But the code says that the rate shall be sufficient to handle these other statutory revenue requirements. Looking at our test year, which was ended May 31st of 2024, our operating expenses were just under $4 million. Our projected operating expenses going forward is about $4.4 million. And about half of that adjustment is due to synchronizing the MCF sales with the MCF purchases. So we're looking at $4.4 million. That's the biggest revenue requirement of the revenue requirements we're factoring into the proposed rates. The other revenue requirements include the residual equity transfers and the pilot payments. I kind of just refer to them all as payment in lieu of taxes. But it's about $237,000 combined per year from the gas utility to the general fund. We did put a minor provision of $50,000 a year to repay the electric loan. We're hoping to be able to repay that with, when, there's always a lag in when you use the gas to when you bill it and then collect the money. There's a month lag in billing and another month lag in collection. So we're hoping that, we'll see that turn around here in a couple of months. Hopefully in May, that'll be sort of a catch-up month for cash flow. And then a depreciation allowance and / working capital. It's pretty nominal, and since we're not producing the gas, we just have the pipes in the ground, and a lot of those are probably pretty old. But it's not a major dollar amount. About $125,000 is what we factored in. So 4.8 million is what we're looking for, and our current revenues in our test year were about 3.9 million roughly. We backed off interest income because we don't have the money to invest. So we were not expecting to earn $80,000 a year in interest going forward. Hopefully we'll get there again, but for the next couple of years. So this schedule is just the base rates only. And again, I think last time I may have scared everybody by picking the peak usage month. About 12 MCF is what the average residential bill, and I know everybody thinks they're average, but there's a lot of low-end users and high-end users that make up an average. So, but that was taking the MCF sold to the residential customers divided by the number of residential customers in the peak month of January. So that was 12 MCF.
And can you tell us what an MCF is? I know
It's,
that you guys
I'm sorry.
explained it to me a lot, but like,
1,000 cubic feet.
so if my bill says 198 for my usage, if people are looking at their bills
Yeah.
to see how this would affect them, mine says that my usage was 198. So what does that mean?
19.8 MCF.
198 I could back into that. Do you have that bill with you by chance? Or?
Just move a decimal point.
Oh, okay,
It's just
so that's
19.8.
19.8.
Yeah.
Would that be 19.8 MCF?
Yes. Yeah, you're not.
It's 100,
Yeah.
well, it's cubic feet.
So 12 is average, we're.
12 was average
Yeah.
for that peak month, and so yeah, you're at.
I've always been above average, so that's.
You're one of the, you're an exceptional user.
Got a lot of users, yeah.
That business is not a
And
good
Steve,
thing.
I know he's an exceptional user as well. I know I am at home too.
Yeah.
But again, there's a lot of, now, if you look at an annual average, an annual average for the residential class is only 4 MCF. What, was that a January usage bill, the one you were looking at,
It was just this last month's bill.
or February?
Yeah,
So it would be January.
Yes.
yeah, from January 16th to February 14th.
Yeah, so that's the peak month.
I just want people to be able to look at their own bills
Yeah.
and see how that, like what 12 means to them.
The average residential usage for a 12-month monthly average is only 4 MCF. And so that's gonna be more in line if you take the annual gas bill and, spread that evenly. Right now, it's about $36 a month. It would go up to about $44.50 a month under the proposed rate schedule. And so I had somebody at Jasper help me with had to fill out a public information request form in there, but Ashley was very nice and helped me with coming up with the Jasper rate comparisons. CenterPoint Energy, they're probably the biggest gas supplier. They serve over 100 communities throughout the state of Indiana. And so even with the rate increase we're looking at, which is about $8.60 a month on an average bill, we're still gonna be less than CenterPoint Energy in their two different service areas. They have a north service area and a south service area. Linton is quite a bit more. Midwest Natural Gas would be still about $1.30 more than what Huntingburg's proposed rate would be. Indiana Gas Company is about almost $6 more, $5.80. Citizens Energy, which is owned by the city of Indianapolis, it's a public trust. I have that in here, but they get income from a lot of other sources that help subsidize their gas bills. So I don't know that that's really an apples and apples comparison, but it is a big provider in central Indiana. Basically, they serve Marion County. So Jasper's less and Citizens is less, but then the other ones in the rate comps are all gonna be more than what we're looking at for Huntingburg. But we've gone 12 years without any base rate adjustment. This does include our average tracking factor for last year. Our test year was 72 cents per MCF, 1,000 cubic feet. And we included trackers for all the other rate comparisons as well. That schedule I had before was just the base rates with our customer classes, but, and it's interesting, Tom and his folks do that gas tracker every month, and some months, I think the lowest month was a credit of $1.77 per MCF. The highest month was about $2. There's a couple months where it's over $1, but then there's a lot of them where it's in between. Now, one way, what we used to do them quarterly. That's why we do it with the electric utility. That helps balance that out, but I don't know. You do it so precisely, I don't really want to fix something that isn't broke, but.
Right, you can move it on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
If you do it quarterly, you're gonna miss out.
Yeah.
If your winter is gonna be in one quarter.
Yeah, yeah, we used to, it depends on where you set the quarter, but, but yeah. So any rate, I know I probably scared you with that peak month last time. I think the average month tells a much different story. It's not quite so shocking. And then I redid the peak month with the tracker with these other communities as well. And again, Citizens obviously is the lowest one because it's a public trust, they've got other subsidies that help buy that down. Jasper was just under $100 for 12 MCF. And, but the other ones in the comparison, Midwest, at that level, Midwest Gas was a little bit less than ours by about $5. All the other ones were still greater than what we're looking at under the Huntingburg proposed rate. So I don't think, I know it sounds like a very sensational percentage when you just look at the raw percentages, but when you look at especially the CenterPoint Energy, because they serve 100 communities throughout Indiana, we're still very competitive with those other gas utilities. And if you look at, take a 2 or 3% inflation factor for 12 years, that's still going to be greater than what we're looking at here. But anyhow, and for the above average users, though, those dollars will be a little bit more. And then this is the rate schedule that's in the proposed ordinance. We did not change the base cost of gas. We still left that at $4 per MCF, so the tracker will still benchmark off the $4
MCF that's built into the base rates, that's been built into the base rates since 2013. So with that, I would be glad to entertain questions. I know this is a tough one to swallow. But let me go back a couple slides just to the revenue requirements. And, you know, if we do something less than what's proposed, it will just take away from, you know, one of these categories. The only category that is not shall would be the pilot payments and the residual equity transfers, but the general fund really depends on some benefit from each of the utilities, the public utilities, not the sewer works, but so that's, I think, the key impact there is there's not a lot of capital investment that's in service anymore since the gas well field's been sunsetted and what do you call it? What do they call that when they shut down an operation? But at any rate,
Decommission.
decommission, thank you, whoever came up with that. I was drawing a blank, but you've got old pipes in the ground, they're valued at cost. $125,000 is not a whole lot of depreciation. On the water utility, for instance, I just looked up to just kind of see what the cash flow was when we were talking about the water project. That depreciation rate's about $740,000 a year. So it's a lot. Water and sewer are your most capital intensive utilities. But gas and electric, you know, need to be kept financially solvent, you know, and so if there is some other options that you want to consider, you know, would just delay being able to fund. We have a real need for working capital right now, and then being able to pay off the electric loan. We'll probably be able to pay that off, but we'll probably have to reborrow it again next heating season when we get on the front end of the heating
Do we
season.
actually get an electric loan, or we approved it but never got
We
it?
proved about we could use it.
Well, haven't had to take them, hadn't had to dip into that yet.
He
We
just said-
approved it, but you
Yeah,
got,
so-
you got $50,000.
So if we took that 50 off, let me,
So you got that 50 there that we're paying back, but we never actually took the money. So there's that.
let me,
What about on the?
are you gonna be able to get by with that, Tom, you think, or?
I don't know, it depends on next
Yeah.
month's.
High energy.
Yeah, another higher one.
Cause,
And
Clemson
with
set up.
in the pro forma, like the operating expenses, the meters that we've done, is that cost in
Well,
that
that would
number,
be
or
a-
were the meters?
We would capitalize those, and it would be a capital cost, so it would sort, let me,
It's back a page, I believe.
it would be, you know, if you're just buying 1 or 2 meters, that's one thing, but that would just expense, but.
Right, but if that was in one of these numbers that we're not gonna have going forward,
Well,
or as many
More
going
meters
forward,
purchased.
what?
We have
We-
more meters purchased.
we spent, in our test year, we spent $245,000 on capital outlays. And I would suspect that a lot of that was meters, because the prior year was only about 115,000.
We have one more purchase of meters, John? Or two?
About 750 to purchase, good.
What do we estimate that cost to be?
Right around, we usually change the meter loop, the regulator and the valve, $660.
That's residential or?
250.
Residential.
Okay.
And that's just the materials?
Yeah.
So you got your labor,
Yeah.
it's
We're not
250.
gonna be able to read our present meters here, what,
It's
2 years?
$500,000.
That's gonna be over probably 2 or 3 years.
And they can,
And then just,
we can speed that up, or we can slow that down based on funds.
We have 3,000 changed out already
I know.
over 3 years.
3,000 over 3 years, so that's a pretty big number that's in these
It's already
numbers
in here.
too. Yeah,
We have how long before we hit those, our present meters have to be replaced?
The next 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay.
We've roughly spent 800,000 so far on the meter change out program
In the 3 years.
We wanna,
in the 3 years.
I think the council probably wants to continue that project, but
Yeah.
can we slow roll it?
It's about 200,000, it's a little less, about 187.5. It's a figure, 200,000.
I could take 3 years to change the rest of them out.
Yeah,
So about 50 grand a year. So unless there's other capital outlays, and you're spreading it over 3 years, we could probably absorb that in the depreciation allowance. Let me just figure what 50,000 does off of the, if we took that loan off the table. Let's see here.
the simplest way I know to say this is, and after talking to other council people, if we're making this long-term rate decision, including these past few years of large purchases for meters and maybe another year of large purchases for meters, then when those meters are all changed out, we reset our rate to a 22% higher, that's what I'm coming, 24% if I look at the average over the course of a year price increase, a 24% increase. We base those rates on those expenses being included, and once they're all replaced, there won't be that expense anymore. So at that point, we'll be bringing in more revenue than what's really necessary based on this rather large rate increase that we're proposing right now.
and I think I would
So-
prefer to do like a 12% increase over a significant amount of time, or, like, to make it kind of in the
multiple
middle of
levels.
the difference then, and
Problem
then see
you're gonna
where we
have is
shake out after.
You got equipment you're going to have to replace in the same time frame, right, John?
What's that?
You got to replace equipment in the same time frame, trucks and
Yeah,
diggers and things like that, so that's an expense.
basically just service trucks.
Right.
Our next service truck is
Basing-
probably in 26.
according to that chart up there, you're basing your MCF's cost and sales based on the last 5 years or 2024?
Well, this is just a depreciation factor.
I'm not looking at that, I'm looking at the one at the very first line item.
Right here?
Yes.
That's based on the 12 months ended May 31st, 2024, but it does not count all those meters in that. That would come out of a capital
But the biggest expenditure in that there is
purchase gas.
purchasing gas at that cost.
Yes.
And we don't know what's cost, and we don't know whether gas is gonna go up or down, or, we don't know. We don't know what the state's gonna drop down, we don't know what the feds are gonna drop down
Yeah.
in the next 5 years.
But that, whatever that changes, we pass that through on the tracker, up or down. So
Yeah,
we just benchmark it off. We've got $4 was our base cost. And last year, we averaged $4.72. So
right.
we're still anticipating that there would be a positive tracker going forward,
So when we pay less, we.
unless gas costs come down again.
we collect
Some,
less.
some months you buy it for $2 an MCF, some months it's 6 or 7, probably $6 is probably the highest that you're paying now, but back in the 2008 range, it was 10, 11, $12 a MCF. It got crazy back then. But
So on a tracker, if we give money back to the customer, could that be rate to be adjusted? Because like, instead of giving, if everybody gets, like, for example, a household gets $2 back on that month, could we set it for 50% of that and keep the other 50% for offsetting?
Well, it just depends, because the
You can
tracker,
do anything you want.
yours is different than
You know,
mine is.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, but I'm just giving an example. I mean, who sets, can we give, say, 50% of it?
That's
for-
per ordinance.
It's that's the rate.
Right.
And it goes up or down based on what we pay for gas.
But it kind of depends on when your billing cycle ends and things too, as to what your tracker is, because my tracker is different than your tracker.
Right.
Just because we're at a different.
Right, right, but say, like, for example, if I had $2 coming back, could you save $1, give me $1, you keep $1 for rainy days, for issues, so we don't have to adjust rates down the road? So we can keep
That would
putting
be
it in
just
the
like cutting the tracker in half, right? I mean.
on the not,
Tend to increase rates then.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're still gonna increase if you're gonna adjust it where people owe
I
more.
doubt there's many months we give money back.
There was a stretch of about a year that we were always in a negative, and we've been up and down from
Ever since.
a negative. I don't know. It's been negative, never really far off of that $4, maybe $3, and then maybe like I said, $5, $6, and then.
But if gas prices were to decrease for some reason, that's not gonna affect your pro forma operating expenses, is it, Buzz?
if it goes down, the tracker goes down, so
Right,
that
so-
they stay the same dollar for dollar. So the change in the cost of gas would be reflected in a lower or higher tracker.
The increase would follow, the expense would follow the income, just like that.
Let's see here. Hang on. Sorry, this is taking my computer's running real slow for some reason. Probably because all those big numbers. But if I were to take out 50,000.
We're supposed to open this hearing or whatever, do we?
Yeah.
We open.
Okay. I don't recall opening
Yeah,
it.
you did.
Is that old age thing?
It is.
That's not for comments.
Yeah, and no public comment yet, just
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
$50,000 is about 1.3% difference. It's not a big difference. So 25. So if we took the 50,000 out, that would lower the rate by 1.3%. We can look at the operating expenses. The the operating expenses, again, about 2.4 million is the gas cost that's factored in. Then we have labor of 509,000, materials and supplies 400,000.
They're doing both, and
Well, we're
that's,
doing both, but it's in the usage of a lot of businesses and it's in their highest months.
Yeah.
$3,000 to $4,000.
How did we come up with
That's the base rate for everybody.
20%
a little bit.
$2.
It was 42% on small farms.
I'll tell you what, if we did a 3-year average on materials and supplies, it was higher last year than it was in prior years. If we took 100,000 off of that material and supply line item along with the 50,000,
Maybe you're talking 4% improves, yeah, it's changed.
Okay.
Well, it's this MCF right here. So you're looking at 19% change for what this guy does. That'd be stipends if he does. And then we're looking at 19, 17%.
that would be about a 4% reduction. If we took, in looking back at the material and supply allowance, if I take a 3-year average instead of just our test year, that's about $100,000 reduction that we could factor in, and take out the $50,000 loan repayment, which that would be about a 4% reduction on the base rate, on the base rates. And if we're gonna, you say we replaced 3,000 meters already?
Yeah.
Was all that done in the last 2 years?
3 years.
3 years.
We spent about 750 in a 3-year period, 750,000.
Well,
John, is that just the cost of the meters and the materials?
And the loops and the cost of the meter and the loop and the regulator.
The first 2,200 meters, we just changed out the register at $100,
Yeah.
plus 220,000. Then the next 800, we had to change meters out at 660. We got another 750 to go.
Okay.
Like I said, the first 2,200, we just changed out the register because we targeted the new meters we replaced before all this.
Yeah, so you went right back in there. Yeah,
So we didn't want to waste that, so we put new registers on
gotcha.
at 100. But then now we're getting into the older meters,
You gotta do everything.
so now we're changing everything out.
You're doing the valve, you're doing the loop, you're doing everything.
Yeah, because some of the older valves had to grease, and they're just.
Can't do that.
A cheater bar to, and if you got a fire, an emergency, and you need to shut that valve off, you want it to work properly.
That $600 figure you said earlier, though, is that includes labor? Is that,
No.
that's just the cost of materials to,
but the labor's all in-house,
The labor's in-house, you can't trigger labor, they're doing
so
it.
we're gonna
They're
have
doing it whenever
that
they got time.
expense anyway.
After all the meters are changed out, the expense will go away.
Thank God.
Well, if we took out 200,000, that would be lowering the materials and supplies by 150, and another 50 for the loan repayment. That'd be about a 5% reduction in the overall increase.
So what was the increase proposed?
It's about 22%, I believe.
Is it a flat percent, or we're doing the base rate and, changing the base
Yeah.
rates and the percentage, right?
Yeah, overall, it's about 24% is sort of the average.
That's just right.
That's just
That's what one time.
Let's see.
Do
Yeah,
you have the slide of how it will change, how it will impact the customer's bills and like the industrial or the
Commercial.
commercial? Yeah.
Yeah, we did increase the base charge a little bit more than we did the volume charge. We went from $7.40 to $10.40. And
That was 29% increase, is that right?
that's why residential is a little bit higher, because that base charge is so much lower. But
42%.
let's just see. Let me just figure a bill here.
This went to 10, from 740 to.
1040 is 41%. 5.
So,
What would be the pros and cons of separating this into two different installments, from one now, starting in May, and another one in May a year from now?
the,
Like half of it, if we lower this down. Huh?
I don't think it's gonna help us. And get it, get it over with.
I would,
Your second would be much higher than the first one, I would assume, because you're playing catch-up.
yeah, after, our discussion here, I think we could probably lower that, material supply outlay by, $150,000 reduction there would get us back, to about where we were before you started that program. And it's probably important to get that program finished though, because generally gas meters will, if they're starting to go bad, they usually start reading slow, so, that would be a potential source of, but you've already done 80% of the system just about, so we'll probably pick up some revenue there, but not a whole lot. If we lowered the base rate impact, that's where the residential rate comes out, I think it was like 27. Well, it came out to 23.5%. So if we knocked 5% off, that'd be down about 18% overall. But since we thought we wanted to get, originally we were talking about doing it all through the base charge, but then that made the, that percentage increase look higher because, if you put $6 on a $7 charge, it's almost, in those low usage months, it's a higher percent, but,
I think the base charge is I agree with that, but I think the base charge is what we think is important. We know that we can't cover the operating costs of the
the
utility
summertime,
in base
yeah.
charges. You just can't do it. But I think a higher percentage of reality needs to be put on the base charges,
Yeah.
what actually that is, and then
well, we started
address
out
the
with,
other part.
yeah, we
you know.
started out with a lot higher number on the, and.
I know it's hard to swallow
Yeah,
when you double a base charge in the middle of summer and you're not, and you have no gas usage if you're someone that only has a
it's
furnace.
still probably not gonna cover the operating costs.
I know, it's not
But-
going to, but I think
We want,
a more realistic approach toward the base charge
I
versus
agree, yeah, because, no, I agree with that, and that's where we started. We had a couple of virtual meeting sessions with Tom and Debbie and, Amy, and, we spent hours playing with how to come up with the number we wanted on the revenue requirement through a combination of base charges and then backed into the impact on the use fee.
I believe that base charge was in that $14 range without making the change to the rate. Do you remember, Tom? On
I-
that first proposal? Because it was almost doubling.
Yeah, it was, and that would have been a hard one to swallow for some.
Yeah, if we just did base only, it was over.
You're right, and I'm
It's over
not
$14.
disagreeing, but I think there's.
Well, I think we need to find a happy medium though, because I think on these, like on the commercial properties, if their bills are increasing by several $1,000s a month because we're doing the usage rather than if we could kind of even it out a little bit more. I think that seems like a substantial jump, several $1,000s more.
We did $1.40 per MCF on the variable charge and $3 on the base charge.
$1.40 on the MCF charge?
That's what we added to the old rate. The old rate was,
Was 641.
well, that's before we did, let's see, yeah, 641. We added $1.40, we treated everybody the same on the MCF cost.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, but it doesn't say where.
No, it's not broken out.
but I did find my worksheet that we were playing with, so I could make some
So the,
calculations here.
the rate charge is under the usage
I'm sorry?
on your bill? It's on your usage?
Well, the base charge,
It's not itemized.
yeah,
That's
it's
my
not,
question.
yeah. The
It's not
base,
itemized.
yeah, the base charge is what we need to generate more dollars in the summertime when nobody's using very much gas. If we did a $5 impact there,
I mean, I definitely am not a fan of a huge base charge when we're not paying for stuff, but I think $10.40 is a really reasonable base charge.
Oh, I agree with
So I think even if we increased our base charge to $12, I mean, do you have a working calculation there that shows like if we increased it to that, where that would put us as far as like what our MCF increase would have to be then?
yeah, so to go to $12, that would be a
How many customers, John?
3,000?
How many customers?
3850.
3850? I thought it was something like that. I can't remember. This affects every utility user, not just, within the city limits, right?
Yeah.
If we change it from a $3 increase to a $5 increase, that would generate about, I'm just looking at residential right now.
200.
That's where most of your customers are. But it would generate about,
Well, I guess-
$250,000.
Well, but that's, I guess, $2.
that would generate about $45,000 more from just the residential. And then, I'd have to go through, and we'd have to go through and figure out what we want to do with industry. Are you comfortable with doing that to the base charge? Getting that up? I mean, I would say most of the investor-owned utilities have a $20 or $30 monthly base charge.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm thinking wrong on this, but it feels like right now, a large amount of our revenue is based on the weather, which doesn't feel like a smart business plan to me. You know, if we've got fixed costs, whether people are using gas or not, we still gotta pay everybody every month. We got benefits and trucks that,
were you listening in on our team's meeting? Because that's.
Yeah,
know, it-
that's
Well,
it's the obvious.
It's obvious, yeah, because
Yeah.
the colder the weather, the more money we're gonna.
Yeah, no, I get it. We started out, I think, at $15 is where we thought we wanted to be, but,
what's the problem with that though? Help me
Yeah.
understand what.
It's just-
We're setting a goal by the end of the
Yeah.
year that we're gonna have a certain amount of revenue needs. We're shifting that, where we're collecting it from to the base rate versus the margin on the usage.
right,
You're still coming up with the same dollar amount, so it feels like
Yes.
we're not really raising anybody's cost by shifting some of the cost to the base
to the
rate.
base charge,
But it does provide a more consistent minimum income
right.
to the department, so that in the low months or in the summer months, or when we're in the winter expecting to our budgetary revenue needs up, and then the sun shines all winter, and we don't sell any gas, or very little gas. It feels like that would make the department a lot more financially sound if we did it that
And
way.
that was where we started with things, and again, I'm glad we're having this discussion, because really, the base charge is just too low, period,
I don't think that's a question at the table.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to pay it, but I mean, there should be a certain amount of cost for that meter hanging on your house.
Absolutely.
Availability cost,
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
It's no different than anything else,
Well, how about
It
this?
doesn't mean I have to watch my TV, they still got the cable hooked to my house that,
How about this? If we decide on a level of the residential base charge, and I'll have to go through and tweak some of these on the non-residential ones, but the residential base charge is gonna be the big driver. I'll take 200,000 off of between the loan repayment and knocking the material and supplies purchases down by 150. That's $200,000 off of the revenue requirement. And then we'll adjust the $1.40 MCF down, the increase. And then we can modify the proposed ordinance accordingly. It's gonna be kinda hard to do right.
Theoretically, if gas would cut in half next year or the year after, we would be putting our eggs all on the base charge where so we're gonna.
That's a good rate comparison, eggs.
Well, eggs dropped $2, I heard.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, I just heard that. But anyway, that's what I'm getting at, is if we're looking at the cost of having that service is
Right.
more.
No, I agree,
covered
yeah.
Every month on your meter, and we get a certain percentage. We're supposed to make a little bit of profit on the sale of gas, okay? And the dollar amount is truly based on what the cost for purchasing it is. So the less we buy, the less revenue we technically take in.
Yeah, we're more dependent, the more we put in the MCF charge, the more dependent we are on cold weather,
Pretty much.
basically.
And that's just
Like him
seems to be
to
an
run a
odd way of doing it.
calculation, Buzz, on making the deficit up based upon the base rate, that'd probably be about $7 and something more. That's a quick calculation for me, it showed about $323 a year in extra revenue. We could take the ordinance up for vote, you could vote it down.
Do you want to do everything through the base rate? Is that what you're saying?
Is that what you're saying, you guys?
No.
That's what I'm hearing?
We want to adjust part of it to the base rate and then look at the potential of an increase.
Where do you think we should put that base rate? And then I can work
Well, and I
the,
think we need to discuss the base rate, not only for residential, but for the
Yeah.
industrial too. because
that's
right
where
now we have-
that's where I've got to do some,
Calculate.
I hate to penalize the
There aren't
industrial side of it.
Yeah, there aren't that many small and large firms, so.
they'll come out ahead by lowering the MCF charge.
They're not going to get beat up too bad on this base rate.
No.
They're just not.
Double it, won't be a big deal to them.
Nope.
But,
Can we increase all the base rates at the same rate then?
Yeah.
Whatever percentage it is for residential, we do that for the industrial as well.
Right now.
Well, what about the in-city and out-of-city? So we're talking about doing the same percentage then for the in-city
Yeah.
versus rural?
well, in the rural, I was if we increased, I had that going at,
Is the rate? is the
one and a
base
half, whatever
rate
the base rate increased in town, and I did that by,
currently?
1.5.
Well, that's not including taxes. $7.90.
So if we made this one,
I think you ought to investigate doing this, the base charge about $12.
$12.
That's my opinion. I don't know about anybody else's. But that's more of a,
Yeah.
that's basically costing me $5 a month. And I can control this side. I don't have to turn the heat on. You know what I'm saying? But I,
Yeah.
you know, that's
Do you want me to
$60
try
a
to
year.
crunch that out right here, or do you want me to,
No.
I'll do that?
No, I think you're gonna have to do a lot more in depth on this to get to where we
Yeah,
wanna
if
see
you
some
give me
things.
what you can live with on the base charge, I'll flip this back around to,
Do we have to open the comments for public? or-
yeah, we still need to open to public.
So we'll now open up for public comment prior to the vote.
And I'm the only one. Oh, well,
No, but Mr. Monday's here.
Oh, we have two, we have two.
you snuck in.
You're welcome to come up here and I'll,
Oh. I think mainly that, you know, as a homeowner, that we already seen our, all the prices going up for our food. Everything continues to go up, but our income isn't going up. So we really need to consider what's going to be best, and especially for people with fixed incomes. How will this affect them? And businesses right now is not a great period of time right now. So your decision's really going to weigh heavy upon our older group and, well, people with fixed income. So, I mean, what Pam was saying, I like the idea of stretching it out a little bit more. I think it's a little bit easier to make changes over a gradual period compared to a larger chunk. Though, you know, what you were saying earlier, to me, is not a big change, but I'm not on a fixed income and having to struggle, so that was
Well,
it.
and I think if we take those, like we adjust kind of the numbers, like we increase the base rate, but we adjust the numbers, I think a combination of those two things will help it to be kind of a slow, more of a slow rolling.
and we're reducing the overall increase by $200,000. That,
And having a realistic, more of a realistic, you know, a 3-year period instead of this horrible winter that we just had, or the summer that we had, more of a spread out average would probably give us a little bit better number.
Is that normal to use a 3-year period, or is there's no reason we don't use 5 or 6 or something to look at things? I don't know what you're,
well,
I don't, you do it every day, but I don't know why you use that number.
we can go back and do a 5-year average. I have all those figures.
To me, that would seem to be, you know,
On the, you're talking about on the material supplies?
everything.
Because if you go back a way, they weren't spending anything on materials.
That's where I wanna go.
But,
John, quit spending, John.
But I have to say, there's a lot of uncertainty what's going on at the federal level. If this all goes through, that no taxes on Social Security, I think nobody's gonna have an issue paying $5 more a month. Just paying, I mean, so there's so much uncertainty.
Same
coming
with
in the future
state
for
level
that,
too.
You know, and possibly state level too, you know, so that's all.
We don't know what they're gonna do.
We have to consider that too, you know, what if, you know, then this is not a real issue then, you know, for residential, to me, my thinking.
We're going through a lot of changes. People have a real hard time with changes. If we're gonna add another change in there, you're gonna have a lot of people who are very afraid. And so, you know, when you minimize it a little bit better or spread it out a little bit more,
Well, and I think people will notice an increase, and if we decrease the rates by $3 or $5, they're never gonna notice that. They're gonna notice the increases more than the decreases. So I think, and John, you've been doing a great job. We appreciate the meter
Yeah.
program, all of that. You've been doing a great job, so. But I think it makes sense to kind of try to see where it shakes out, like to increase it just a little bit, not a huge amount, and then see, because we can always adjust this next year then too, can we?
Do we have to have another rate study if every time we change this? Is that right?
you know,
We have to have some kind of background, you have to have some kind of
you
accounting
need some
background.
sort of a calculation, but usually you like to do things within a year of the test year, but we don't have to, we could set in some sort of a phase up if you like. I like the egg comparison.
One of my, I'll try to make this one of my final comments, but, I hear you. And I don't think anybody, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm pretty certain nobody sitting at this table, is very excited about what happened with the sanitary sewer project, okay? And that, a lot of that was out of the city's control. That got dealt by regulations changing, how they decided how we were measuring our discharge levels and things like that. And that project more than doubled. And then that caused the rates to be affected, and they turned into 6 increases or something instead of 3. So, and I'm personally unhappy about it, but I don't think anybody at this table's happy, but that's something was basically mandated but not funded. Here, fix this and figure out how to pay for it. I think we have a little bit more concern about this right now, trying to be as lean as possible. When Buzz talks about interest rates, I understand that. I'm in this world, but when we're talking about interest, when we're making interest money on money that we have socked away as part of our utilities, I don't think our constituents want to hear about our money making interest when their bills are being considered for being increased. I mean, but we do need to be solvent. I mean, we have to. There's a area you got to be in. You got to have some money put away for a rainy day, and you ought to put that money to work and try to make a little money on it while you got it. But at the same level, we need to find a balance here to where this is a little bit easier for folks to swallow and for folks to pay for. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, all of that, there's so much uncertainty. There's talk right now about property taxes at the state level being cut, which means we're gonna have some revenue to make up there, or big cuts to make in the city budget. And so my hesitation is the same as Steve's and others that I've talked with about this, is just, we don't want Janet to put such a burden on people, and I understand we've got to stay solvent. We got to pay the bills. I trust that John and all of other department heads are spending wisely. They're spending carefully. I trust that if we go into a budget and doge it, we're probably not going to find waste in those budgets. So the numbers are real. We've got to be solvent, and so we have to charge enough to keep the department running, so we provide the services that people expect. But at the same time, I think we also have to be just aware that some people are struggling, and some people, a $9 a month average increase in their bill over a year they're going to feel it. You know, there's some people are already at that limit, and so we just got to be really mindful of that as we're coming up with these numbers. So that's what we're trying to do. I think we're asking enough questions.
Yeah, no, this has been a good work session, I think.
So,
Phil, if we still stick with the same ordinance, but
Well, I think it'd probably be better if we just voted this ordinance down and started over, because it looks like we're gonna increase.
we're gonna reduce the overall revenue requirement, but
Yeah, but we're
we're gonna,
gonna increase from what we advertise, we're gonna
Do you have a
increase the
comment?
monthly service charge. We are gonna decrease the volume
does he have a
charges,
comment?
but it's not what we advertised. It's more in one category than what we advertised.
Do you guys still prefer to do it like a 2-year increments? No? Just do it all at one time?
So let's,
Because we're gonna do
The only thing
wastewater
I guess
again,
I
we're
would-
gonna do water again, you gotta,
I don't want to do water again.
I bet you're gonna do wastewater.
I guess I'd caution about going back too far and going back 5 years and averaging, because what we're trying to catch up here on is inflation. We haven't had an increase for 12 years.
Right.
And so what's gotten us into this position is we haven't kept up with inflation. The cost of gas doesn't affect us, because if it goes up, we add the cost of the tracker. If it goes down, we reduce the cost of the tracker. So it's inflation we're trying to catch up with, and if we go back and set a revenue requirement based upon too far back, we're back in the same boat. You know, we're not recovering from inflation. We need to be somewhat forward-looking in order for these rates to remain in effect for a few years.
further we go back, the less real the numbers are,
Yeah.
you know, so. Last 3 years are probably more real than what I was at 5 years ago. I think we all can say that.
after COVID and all that, nothing came down, you know.
Yeah.
I don't even like saying that word,
It's
so.
gotta be adjusted.
Well, the supply chain thing,
Yeah.
and
So, do we entertain a motion for a vote on this?
Well,
Do we need to close the public hearing?
Well, I'm sorry.
Unless there's
I now close the public hearing.
Did anyone else want to speak?
Comments?
The only thing I have to say is you were totally wrong when you said people won't notice a $5 increase. You know how
No,
many
I think the increase they'll notice, I think if we decrease it later on, they won't notice it.
Well, I'm not asking for a decrease
Yeah.
later on. I think you need to maybe step this.
Right, I don't wanna make a huge change now and give them
You know how
a
many
decrease
kids-
later on,
How many
but,
kids get free lunches out at the school out here?
oh,
Most of
I have students
And
in
every
school.
time they're off of school, how much that hurts the parents.
Mm.
You know, that $5 meal they have to fix for their kid hurts their budget. You know, I guess on a fixed income, I'm retired, so I get so much a month, whatever. But anyways,
$9
You know,
is
when-
2 or 3 meals for
yes,
somebody.
when you look at a 27%, which you advertise in the newspaper, everybody looked at it, 27% raise. That's a lot of money, 27% for a person that's on a fixed, you know, or a low-income person.
Right, and I think we all understand that, so that's why we're trying to get
Yeah,
it.
So I
to
agree
even to
with
that,
everything
yeah.
you're doing, maybe fix, you know, put that base rate up and lower the costs. It will help, hopefully help some of the people.
Well, it protects them from the unknown of gas rates moving up and down too a little bit.
It's a good
Any other comments before we close? Thank you for being here, giving us those comments, but we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on the proposed gas rate ordinance. Able to entertain final adoption of the ordinance.
We're going to deny this adoption, right?
If there's no motion to adopt, it dies for lack of action. Well, somebody could move actually to
Dismiss the adoption.
to not adopt it, to.
I'll
move
make a
to not
motion to
approve
not
it.
adopt it.
Second.
So we have a first and a second to not adopt the ordinance. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries to not adopt the ordinance.
Not adopt.
So, Mr. Crone will get revised figures, and I'll incorporate that in an ordinance, and forward that on to everyone.
Okay.
normally I'd be disappointed if this happened, but I think this was really a productive work session, and thank you all.
What you can do.
And thank you for being kind.
At our last scheduled meeting, we did do had discussion regarding the hoarding ordinance. It was moved to take to the next council meeting for consider of adoption of the ordinance. So, do we have any discussion regarding that ordinance?
Phil, can you hit the high points there?
Sure. So the proposed ordinance that you introduced in February, it defines hoarding as the excessive accumulation of any tangible personal property in any dwelling or on any premises or in any vehicle within the city of Huntingburg that creates or contributes to one of 8 public health concerns. Creates a fire hazard, obstruction of access for fire emergency or medical response personnel, creates harborages of insects and rodents and other vermin, creates unsanitary conditions, creates conditions that are offensive to the senses and which interfere with comfortable enjoyment of life or property by others, which create a violation of property maintenance codes, which create a hazard to public health, which create dwellings or premises that are unfit for human habitation, or which constitute excessive clutter in spaces that preclude activities for which those spaces were designed. We've defined dwelling as to be essentially any building or enclosure used and intended to be used for living and sleeping. Premises is any tract of real estate in the city of Huntingburg. Tangible personal property means any substance that's capable of being touched or perceptible by touch. And a vehicle is any conveyance on wheels, rollers, or otherwise, whether it's motorized or not. So the ordinance then prohibits that practice of hoarding, the excessive accumulation of personal property that contributes to one of those 8 public safety and health concerns. It does create enforcement in the Code Enforcement Office, the Department of the City of Huntingburg. The Code Enforcement Department has the right to cite violators for conditions they observe from a public street or from a public alley or from neighboring property with the consent of the owners of that property. The Code Enforcement Department may enter dwellings with the consent of the occupant or the owner to do an inspection when there's probable cause to believe that hoarding is an offense inside the building. Lacking consent, if the Code Enforcement Department feels that it's serious enough, they can apply to the court for inspection warrant. Violations are then given notification of their violation in 30 days to correct it, and failure to correct would result in a fine of $50 for the first offense and $100 for each subsequent day that the offense continues. The ordinance does give the individual charged with the offense an opportunity to appeal the notification and the charge to the Board of Public Works and Safety by filing written notice of intent to appeal within 10 days after the issuance of the notice, and then a hearing is held before the Board of Public Works and Safety.
Okay. And that was a mouthful.
Yeah. Thank you for
Thank you for that, but I just wanted to bring that forward. We are addressing it with the 8 specific items there. It was brought to attention by someone that hoarding is sort of a mental health issue, and how do you address that? But that's not what we're addressing. We're addressing these 8 items that are tangible and you can deal with. I feel badly for people that have this issue, and that's not what we're trying to. We're trying to work on the actual 8 things that affect citizens or neighbors, public safety, whatever. So
Exactly.
And this isn't, I think it's important that this isn't something that we're just picking on people for hoarding. These are things that have come to our attention from first responders, from people that have been firsthand inside of houses and have seen that it's dangerous, and we're trying to help people, So I think that's important to know that we're not trying to do an invasion of people's privacy or their rights or anything. This is something that,
There's also health issues for the entire community when you've got old tires stacked up and providing a breeding ground for mosquitoes that multiply and spread out. And, those things need to be addressed. They need to be fixed. And the more teeth we can give to our code enforcement team, I think the better the entire community is gonna be. What people see when they drive through town, what neighbors are experiencing in their neighborhoods. I think it's gonna be a real positive going forward.
I think we've been waiting for something like this for a while now. I'm glad it's finally surfaced and we're voting on it. I think it's unfair for a property owner to have neighbors who decline or they devalue the property that's next door to you, or probably your property that you own, that you worked hard to keep it clean or whatever. I think this is a great start. If we have to modify it down the road, we could, I guess. Make it worse, make it not worse, more strict, more lean, whatever. And we'll start with this to begin with, I believe. I think this is a good start for this. And,
I think I've made the comment before to all of you, we're in excess of 400 letters and violations we find a year, and things still aren't getting better. So I did sit down with our code enforcement officers, and they got together with Phil and was like, what can we do to put more teeth in this? So we're not moving it from one place to another, or putting it in the back of our pickup and bringing it back, or whatever it happens to be. I think that this is a step forward in that. And there's a little more teeth, I think, into it when it comes down to some of the fines and there. So it will solve a lot of issues, and inability, because to say that our code enforcement aren't doing anything, 400 letters is a lot of letters to follow up on, and that they do, so it's, plus the fact that each of them do other duties within the cities.
I don't think you see hoarding going on in an HOA area. You know, there's only one area in our town it has an HOA, and that neighborhood looks very nice. You know, I give them that. So I think if we can work on the rest of the town to clean up a little bit, if that's what it takes this to do it, I think this is fair. We give them 30 days to start cleaning up. I'm sure our code enforcement people will work with them. You know, as long as they see improvement, that's being processed, that's being worked on.
And I think as soon as they're identified too, there's a lot of, I know, there was a lot of camps that came in or youth that came in to help. And so these are some items too that we're not just gonna find these people and, you know, throw them to the wolves. I think that there are resources in our city that we will set them up with to help them as well.
Any more questions?
Hearing no further comments, I make a motion to adopt 2025-06.
We have a motion to adopt, we have a second,
I'll second it.
and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Kissling. Bound.
Aye.
Mulkey.
Aye.
Ware.
Aye.
McFerrin.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays.
Motion passes. Thank you for everyone for your comments. You know, just realize at this point, the next step, we need to be able to provide resources for those that don't have resources to make that happen. And, there are a few of those. I think most can though. I think most people do. All right, next up, Clerk Treasurer Thomas Dipple.
Yeah, this is an annual ordinance that we were just talking about part of it. This allows me to move the money from the utilities into the general fund, as what the amounts that we put in the budget for last year for 2025. So this would, is the electric utility $225,000, gas utility $225,000, and water utility $50,000. Goes into fund the general fund.
So you need a motion on that, or is it just?
It's an ordinance, it's 2025-07, resolution.
Make a motion to pass resolution 2025-27.
I'll second.
Got a first and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes. Development Commission report.
This is another report that I have to give you from the Redevelopment Commission to the mayor as the executive, common council as the fiscal body, and it comes from the Redevelopment Commission and the Development Authority. Summarizes the activities in 2024, both the receipts and the disbursements, and kind of gives a summary of each bond that is outstanding and what's left to pay on that bond. They also have all of the parcels within each TIF. It's part of it, so it's for your review. But you don't have to accept it or anything, I just have to give it to you. And then after, you had asked last time about the debts, the Trex collections versus, as you approved the write-offs, we had 82,776 of write-offs in the last 6 years. But with the Trex, we have recovered $72,767.
Wow,
So-
great job, Tom, yeah, good work. Oh, that's exciting.
I think Bill gets a little
So
bit.
anyway, that's.
Good job, Bill, good job, guys. Okay, yeah.
Thank our legislators.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't, I think that's done up at the State House.
Well, the dregs, that's a good idea, because that, I mean, yeah, that's, okay. Good work, guys.
That's the most enthusiasm we've seen.
Yeah, hey, step down, would you?
Okay. Was that exciting? New to our city attorney. I have nothing, Bill Schneider.
I think I do have this resolution that needs to be signed by everybody.
No, I have nothing.
Any citizens items? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Good night.
We have a citizen item.
He's giving you a hard time down that end.
The hoarding ordinance has been a 15-year problem. It has been a long time coming where we've known that there's been a problem. Mayor Elkins, thank you for hearing me. Mr. Schneider, thank you for looking and researching plans. And to the city council, your voices actually did a ripple effect. I've had more people come up to me and say, okay, maybe I can come and talk to you and not be so afraid. It is scary standing here. And for us to be able to voice our causes and concerns and to see that you guys are listening to what your voters are saying brings us hope. To know that you guys are advocating, and we're really looking at just improving our host city. We're not narrowing in on one person in particular. We're really looking at what's going to make our Huntingburg shine. So thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The other thing is, survivors of suicide donated a buddy bench from the VA that is now going to be in our city park. The buddy bench identifies 988 as our crisis line, so that if someone is suffering from depression, having suicidal thoughts, they have a bench that they can sit on. It helps identify, hey, come talk to me. But it has the resources right there also so that they know how to dial 988, talk, text, and saving lives. So that will be in our city park really soon.
We'll get some pictures, send you locations, so you can look for that. We're trying to get it near a walking path somewhere where people can sit and reflect. And
So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, thank you. Any council items?
I did have one thing, and I know, you guys are like, oh. I did have a request, and I don't know if this is even us, but the signage about the overpass on 231 headed north is very small, and recently the trains have been stopped for a significant amount of time, and so.
It's bad, and, you know, the other one we'll look at is coming in on 64 from the west.
Right.
It's really bad there too. So I think both locations out, obviously, we gotta look at the signage, proving that for the, steer people towards the overpass. It's a nice yellow flashing sign down on the north side, but don't have that type of situation anywhere else, tell people.
Well, and I really, it took a minute for me to look and see, and I think that it kind of blended in with the other sign, so I didn't know, because there is a sign
I
here.
just go
it
that way automatically.
I do too, but I thought, well, for people, I feel really bad whenever people are stuck there for a significant amount of time.
There was a day I counted 45 semis between there and south side of Huntingburg, so
Yeah.
it was, they had no idea where to go.
And that's a thing too, if we can get it, because they said, and I don't know how technology works that much, but they said that even their GPS didn't route them, so I don't know if that's something that we can do with.
Signs are controlled by the state though, right?
They are.
Stay in the railroad.
Is there something that we can do with, I don't know, the main different apps
We'll
that
have
they use
that
or something to
We'll have
have?
that conversation,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's something we have, looked at internally.
There's some certain GPSs that the semi drivers use that give them heads up on low overpasses and railroad crossings and things like that. We could probably submit some stuff to that, or
If there was some, like a commonly used one that we could let them know, because the last time there was a stoppage, my neighbor came up, he said that he actually stopped and talked to one of the semi drivers who said, oh my gosh, I've been here for 45 minutes and I didn't even know there was an overpass, so.
When I use Google Maps, I always get an alarm for a speed trap ahead, so maybe people could insert that train ahead.
Yes, yes.
The semi's got that now
Law
too.
enforcement officer.
You're a law enforcement, okay.
Yeah, we changed just the last couple of months they've changed that. So, thank you, Pam.
Yes.
Any other council items? Baylor.
How is the garden coming along? I know Malia, I think she's left, has she left? She left.
yeah. Don't know yet. I've given them dates of where we're gonna have city employees available to help them with equipment and stuff. They've not returned with a date and time that they
I've
want to
also,
agree on.
I've had some people,
So-
say that they're interested to help. So if we
Okay.
know something more
Okay.
too, that we can.
All
make
right,
that public.
we'll do that. We have a fund, we have all kinds of stuff. We just need willing students to show up to do it. So that's where we're at. All right, do we have a motion to,
I move to adjourn.
all right, we have, Councilman Ware and Bolte, first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.